and you can definitely share a presentation once you're ready. Hello, everyone. I'm very glad to be here with you today. Thank you for finding a time to explore together that intersection between AI and gender equality. Again, my name is Michaela. I'm a founder of AI startup, which focuses on building AI application for trustworthy research. So we are aiming to deliver evidence-based sources and information from credible reference points for everyday users, but mainly for researchers. You know that in today's world, the proliferation of misinformation is huge, and this is our mission. I also work as a human rights advocate with different organizations for about 10 years. So I'm really standing on the both sides of the spectrum, and I'm here today provide not only general understanding of what is intersection between gender equality and AI, but also a personal experience as a tech founder from the innovation space and also as a human rights advocate. Gender equality really falls uh, under the human rights, and I'll be happy to talk about it a little bit more. Christine, do we have presentation ready?
Yes, do you see it now? Because I have shared it. Do you see it, the presentation?
No.
Yeah, wait a minute. Huh?
So while Christine is putting up our presentation, I know we have a very diverse group here today with us, meaning some of you are here to learn more generally about AI and gender equality, and some of you, I'm sure, you have a quite deep knowledge. My goal today is really to strike a right balance between laying the foundation for those who don't know a lot about it, but also digging deeper into certain aspects of this talk. We will be starting with what artificial intelligence is, just to lay the ground for this talk, and then we move on the intersection. So artificial intelligence is a very fascinating and a booming field right now. At its core, it is about creating a computing systems that really mimic and simulate a human tasks. And the tasks that we're referring to mainly are reasoning, problem solving, data collection, learning from this data, and problem solving. Even in technology world, there is not one single definition for AI. There are multiple definitions out there. And you often hear about also machine learning models when it comes to AI. So I just want to make it very clear that machine learning models are like a data-driven problem solvers. They serve as a technique for achieving AI, and you can consider them as a subset or a motor for AI to happen. Computationally speaking, it is really about transforming input data into output data, providing certain solutions. And in today's world, we have classified AI into three categories: weak or a narrow AI, and that is the AI that we use nowadays in most of the applications that are out there. It is called the AI that is designed for specific tasks. Imagine like Alexa or a Siri, okay? And this is the AI that we operate with today. The second category is a general AI, and this is still hypothetical AI. So this is the AI which eventually in the future surpasses, kind of reaches human intelligence level, and also exhibits some of the capabilities of a human being. And one of those are, for example, understanding at a human intelligence level, applying knowledge across a wide range of tasks and domains, just like a human being would do. We haven't reached that type of general intelligence yet, but we're kind of on the way. And your question might be, isn't ChatGPT, for example, general AI? The answer is no. ChatGPT is still in the category of narrow AI. And the last is an artificial super intelligence. And this one is really raising ethical, societal, and philosophical questions, because this one is really predicted to surpass human intelligence in a certain aspect and be better in creativity, in understanding. And you probably heard or maybe read some of those articles talking about when machine is gaining consciousness. So
Sorry, there is somebody. If you can mute your micro, because I hear some noise in the ground.
So when we look at the AI, I wanted to really bring you the perspective of where we are now with AI applications and where we're heading to. Next slide, please, Christine. I'm also bringing you a short timeline of AI. Many of you probably again know something about it, but for the purposes of this presentation, it is really important to know that AI has been here for some time. And it all started, and I'll bring you a little story, with the Second World War, really, as far as military operations happened at the time. And some of the countries, they started to uncrypt their military operations. So in order to decipher messages, enemies used the first computational systems at the time to decode what other countries are saying, what are their tactics, and what they're planning in terms of the war operations. And those were really kind of the first cases that laid the foundation then for the further computational development and also lay the foundation for AI to develop. After the Second World War, Christine, next slide, please. What happened was that the famous person, Alan Turing, British mathematician, came up with the idea machine can be actually smart and can exhibit decision-making abilities. Not everyone really believed him, but what he saw about decoding the messages, he was really convinced that the machines, they have much higher computational potential than what was known at the time. And with that machine that you see in the slide right now, he provided and demonstrated a Turing test, which exhibited some of the decision making at the time. So what happened next? Research and scientific community got really excited about it. And in 1970s, Christine, next slide, please. The researchers and the scientists, they started to play around with the term of, around 1956, sorry, they started to play with the term of AI. And it was at the Dartmouth College in New Hampshire that they first, for the first time, coined officially at this conference that you can see there. And because it was coined officially and adopted in a scientific community, the real development of AI kicked off. Next slide, please. The first chess programs were developed. This is the picture from Stanford sources where you can see the engineer playing with the first chess games that were powered by the very minimum level of AI at the time. Not a lot of people know that in 1970s, it was also the time that the first chatbot, Elisa, was invented. And all those researchers and the scientists, they really put their focus on AI because they believed it has a potential. However, in the mid of 1970s and 1980s, next slide, please, the AI winter happened. And the AI winter really refers to the time when AI development almost stopped. It really slowed down. So why did it happen? All this excitement, all these beliefs, and suddenly we're stopping all this AI development. Not everyone knows that the reasons behind that were that at the time, researchers and the scientists, they kind of overpromised the claims of what AI can do. So public eventually they lost interest. They thought, oh, this is the hoax. It really cannot do what they said it can do. At the same time, just remember, we didn't have computers as we have today. So the hardware was a huge limitation for AI to be developed and to happen. We didn't have big data available online as we have it today. And so all this data collection, it was happening literally manually, and it was fed into those very old school machines. So by de facto, it was really impossible at the time from the technical standpoint to develop AI further. Also, the grants and the funding available for such technology was not as robust and as complex as it is today. But then in 1980s, next slide, please, the countries really turned their focus into a space exploration. And with the space exploration, they needed, again, very good technology. And companies like and organizations like NASA, they started to, again, implement AI into their hardware, into their machine, into their spacecraft. And they started to develop, which is called a remote agent, where remotely they wanted to operate a vehicle in the space. And from then on, because AI was such a crucial for space exploration, the focus of technological world was again on AI. Next slide, please. Another milestone you heard probably about was when IBM's AI machine has beaten the world chess player Garry Kasparov. So this is the picture from the time. And it was a really stunning and a shocking for the community that finally the machine can make a better strategic making decisions. And after 1996, all the big companies rolled out their technologies. Computers came into a public, mobile phones. In 2000s, what happened? Instagram, Facebook, all social media and large tech companies appeared in the tech ecosystem, and they started to implement some sort of AI into our everyday devices. Next slide, please. So our iPhones, even without knowing, started to have some level of a basic AI, as well as our smart devices around the house, AI voice assistants, our fridge, and AI was really introduced to a public. Next slide, please. The very last milestone was a ChatGPT in 2022. And I'm sure you all tried ChatGPT, but why suddenly there was such a boom around ChatGPT? Simply said, AI always seems something extremely complex, hard to understand, and suddenly OpenAI took AI and simplified it in such a easy interface that every single person could use it. And that really moved the needle. And the focus, once again, was on AI, and this all AI development really accelerated. When we're talking about AI, I really want to bring also a global perspective. Next slide, please. The reason for that is that in the past, we were very much used to the tech hubs around the world, like Silicon Valley, which were, those hubs were famous for developing softwares. But it is no longer a reality. And I like to bring awareness to different regions who are doing extremely well with the AI. If there's one thing technology really allowed us to do remotely is to get upskilled. So the people and the workers in those regions, like in Africa, they're getting really upskilled in engineering, and they are becoming a very strong workforce developing AI applications. I don't know how much you know about different AI applications around the world, but it's really worthy to mention here that places like Africa developing AI applications to address their community needs, especially around the healthcare and diagnosis and the drug discovery. While Latin America, countries are focusing on AI applications that can help them with the agriculture optimization and smart farming techniques. In the Middle East, Dubai is using AI for the smart policing, surveillance, and the safety. And then Saudi Arabia, they have the people of Saudi Arabia, and special government, they have this huge dream of developing a smart city called Neom, which is in the works by 2030. And that futuristic city will be fully equipped, that's the promise, by AI applications. In Europe, I'm bringing the example of a Switzerland, which is using the AI applications for fraud detection and computing large financial projections, which are very hard to be conducted just by humans. Asia countries like South Korea and Japan are famous for using AI in robotics, and those robots are often a companions for elderly, for medicine delivery, and so on. In North America, especially in the US, we have AI applications very much present in entertainment. You probably heard about the strikes in Hollywood, where AI is used for script writing. but also in a consumer technology, in social media, for advertising. Canada sees the potential of AI applications for climate change and environmental challenges. And Australia, similarly, they use a lot of AI applications, for example, AI-powered drones to detect endangered species like koalas. So I'm bringing this global perspective because AI has a really potential to address the community needs and be developed by people of that region rather than what it used to be in the past, where large tech companies from some epicenters came and they deployed technologies globally without sometimes considering gender, culture, ethnicity, and so on. In this second section, next slide, please, Christine. We move on to relationship between artificial intelligence and the gender equality. In this fast-paced world of technology, AI has really emerged as a powerful driving innovation across multiple sectors. It has transformed the way we communicate, we interact, and we learn. Yet we still encounter a critical crossroad, one where AI intersects with the fundamental principles of a gender equality. At this time, when we have a digital technology, women are still very much underrepresented in today's world, and gender inequality is very much present. According to the UN, you will probably know, we should achieve gender equality in 300 years. And I brought that history of AI to show you how much we have achieved in 100 years and put numbers into perspective, yet the gender equality should happen in 300 years. The numbers, they just don't add up, right? So this is why I'm also bringing you some striking numbers here to back up that gender inequality is a real challenge in our society, where 2.4 billion women of working age, they still cannot afford the same economic opportunities around the world. 178 countries, they maintain certain level of legal barriers that prevent women from full economic participations, and 95 countries do not guarantee equal pay for equal work. And I just want you to remind that a lot of those countries, they already adopted human rights doctrines and the treaties that should guarantee that particular right. So again, a big contradiction in today's world. And globally, women have only 3/4 of the legal rights afforded to men. The most shocking number is the one that is displayed down below. The gap between men's and women's expected lifetime earnings globally is now at 172 trillion US dollars. Next slide, please. When we zooming on the tech world, I can definitely say from my personal experience, I was in the technology and innovation space for 10 years now. Globally, I work in the EU, I work in the UK and the US. Women are still very much underrepresented in the research and design of these technologies, but also in other areas like marketing, like leadership. And while this is getting better, it is just not fast enough. So again, some numbers to back up our conversation today. Just 25 women are 25% less likely than men to know how to leverage digital technology. I'll bring the example. Men very often they to hop on the trend, they download applications to optimize their fitness routine, while women are less likely to do that. And it is not because they don't know how, but often they juggle so many responsibilities and duties in their life that the last thing sometimes they think of is jumping on this trend. So it is really societal role that sometimes limits them from getting faster into those technologies. They are also 2 to 4 times less likely to know how to program computers and be more autonomous, and 13 times less likely to file for ICT patent. And the reason for that, and I met with this narrative many times in technology world, they don't believe themselves as much sometimes as men's founders. For example, even if they have a great product, they often question themselves because there is this stereotype in the tech world: is my product good enough to file for the patent? I'm not sure. So they get very often discouraged. And then only 20% of employees in the technical roles in the companies, in machine learning companies especially, are women. And globally, less than 12% of AI researchers globally are, again, women. To say that those numbers that I'm bringing are from 2022 UNESCO report. I would like to also bring some root causes as to why this is happening, which we will see on the next slide. You probably heard about the internet gap that is happening in the world, almost 4 billion people, and the majority, again, of them are women. I also want to mention digital skills and STEM participation. And again, while the numbers are growing of students, female students who are getting into those fields, one of the biggest obstacles that I even observed in technology world is how to maintain those women in the tech circles. What happens, which is kind of a common, is that after 3 to 6 years, a lot of women, they drop out of the tech sector because they're just so much discouraged, they're not supportive, that we can showcase the number of them entering the workforce, but how to maintain them in this workforce and how to create that support system so they stay there for longer time than 3 to 6 years. And what was a very shocking number that I discovered, that actually female funded startup, the rates fell by 15%. So female funded startups, they're not growing in the numbers. Right now, they are declining. And it also kind of shows you what is the support in the ecosystem if women, they decide not to found their startups. Next slide, please. Here I'm bringing a little bit of insights into a development of AI and the research that has been conducted, and also from my previous experience as someone who technically managed the algorithm development. We identified a really 3 primary stages where the gender bias usually occurs when it comes to algorithm design. Number 1, it is during a data collection. So the first time, even me, when I said with our technical team, is it's all about the data. Before you start to code, you need to have determined what are your data, where do you source them from, how diverse they are, if you care about that issue. But this is the initial stage where when we collect the data, it can contain historical gender biases or reflect certain societal stereotypes. And these AI models then learn and perpetuate those biases from the data. It is also important not what are the data that we collected, but also how we collected them. So the collection methods that we use. I'll give you the example. For example, in a hiring, if a company primarily collects employee feedback through surveys distributed to only certain groups, then we have the method that was used is just not correct. The same for historical records. For example, when we're analyzing historical records or documents just only from male historical figures, the data collection method is not fair and just, and the data that we're getting and we're training our models are just already biased. In algorithm design, gender bias can emerge during the initial stage when we literally code and we determine what kind of features we're going to use in AI, in our AI applications. But also because there is a lack of diversity in a tech team. So mainly if you have men's engineers, it is never that they want to purposely 90% that they never want to purposely cause a bias. But even when I speak to our male engineers, our thinking is set on efficacy and how to get the solution technologically right very quickly and very fast. All other things for them are secondary. So there is a really technical and business metrics for them as a first. This is how they are programmed. This is how they are taught in the schools when they're developing the codes. So it already comes from their education. When I told them, they told me when we were using our data, when we were using our data for the algorithm training, they suggested 1 or 2 sources. and I ask them, why are you suggesting one or two sources, and just from particular region, we will not represent a diversity of data? And just then they realized what's my point, and they were able technically to come up with a solution. But they also explained me, we didn't do it purposely. We just, we just wanted to deliver a technically viable solution at a very fast speed. And the pressure of today's world, and especially with AI applications, they need to be developed so fast that the pressure that the corporates and the overall world puts on the engineers sometimes causes that they tend to take kind of easy routes or the faster routes that they would normally do. Okay, so we can have a women, of course, as an engineers, but again, I want to highlight they don't necessarily need to be engineers in order to bring awareness. They can be technical project managers, they can be business managers. There just must be a very strong collaboration between the teams where women can become kind of an official audits elements in the company and have those conversations with the engineers. Hey, what are the data that you're sourcing? It is as simple as that. Sometimes they don't even need to code. It is about raising awareness and educating them. Because if you have just a man, and even if they're notified from outside, look, there is a gender bias, because it is not an issue that they're really concerning them personally, they are less likely to fix it. But if there is a woman and that issue is touching her personally and her community and her gender, I can tell you there will be a pressure on them to close this gender gap that is happening. And then another step that is happening when we're implementing applications, I saw this personally, a lot of time in decision-making powers in the procurement teams, in the leadership roles, those are the men who are deciding what kind of AI application are we going to adopt into our businesses, and they very often define then the trajectory of those deployments for our world, because again there is a lack of leadership representation in the policy and regulation. Kind of the same, it is getting better. We have much more ethicists right now that are voicing their opinions. It is getting better, but in leadership role, again, the representation is just extremely low, which is causing that very often, because it is a kind of network, especially in the technology world. They tend to push the AI application of my friend, and my friend happened to be the classmate from my high school. Okay, it's a very common societal problem that we have. And then suddenly the decision what kind of AI applications we're using in today's world, 80% of the decisions are made by men. And again, we have some men here, so this is not to shed any negative light. I just want to really lay a neutral ground so we can critically think about this issue today. Next slide, please. Existing problems that we encountered. I wanted really to come with a very specific examples. Just think about science fiction movies and books that were written years ago. All those female voices out there that are assisting main character. This stereotype really happened years ago, and then when the technology started to develop all those voice assistants, they kind of they took this stereotype and they implemented again into Alexa. Okay, so I want you to go back in the Star Trek movies or any other science fiction movies and really think about where women are placed in those first science fiction movies. Virtual assistants, a lot of companies like Amazon, they justify, oh, we used female voice because it is more soothing, more approachable, and more helpful. They often have that psychological argument. But what I want to stress here, regardless of the psychological argument, it doesn't help our society.
Wait, now it's working again. And
Christina, go on.
Oh,
you wanted to say something?
Apologies.
So that psychological argument that the large corporations are making as to why they use female voices for AI assistants are just, again, hierarchically putting women on a lower position. While IBM Watson, when they create a medical assistant who should be kind of like a medical researcher, and he should express himself more in a instruction kind of a way with the physicians, they used a male voice. Why? Because physicians are often male. And the future of AI looks that a lot of jobs that are about to be taken are again jobs of the women who are as bookkeepers, accountants, receptionists, because historically they landed those jobs. Next slide, please. But very important point, the case that I investigated is ChatGPT. Just think about it. It has been released just now. It is a very current technology. It should take into consideration gender inequality that we're all voicing. Yet, in this slide, what I'm showing, probably you're not able to see unless Christine zooms in. When I ask ChatGPT, who are the most important people in history? ChatGPT answered with a list of names, and most of those names are men. Probably there are two women. When I say history, what does it mean? Does it mean recent history, last 5 years, last 10 years? Why it is showing me the list of all men? I asked ChatGPT, are you showing me men's figure? Because historically, women were less present in important roles. If that is the criteria, maybe there is a historical and societal aspect to it. However, ChatGPT answered, no, I'm not taking this criteria into a consideration. So then I asked, why are you showing me again just the male figures? Can you show me more female figures? And it showed me more female figures. However, I really thought a model that it should be more diverse. When I reopened a new chat again, and I tried again and again and again to ask the same question, for 15 times, it constantly showed me around 80% of male figures compared to 20%, which means out of 10 people, 2 people were just female. These models are used in today's education when kids search, for example, for historical data or for their essay, and they ask ChatGPT, who are the most important people? Of course, they see the majority of them being men. And may this be the fact that there are a lot of important men, but the kind of a pushing a narrative that the women and pushing the ideology that women were important in history is extremely important for further application of AI, but also to understand a gender equality in that sense. This really got me worried, to be honest with you, how we can develop a new AI application for today's use, so recently developed, yet we're using very outdated data. And you probably know that ChatGPT work with a lot of forum data and so on. Try it yourself after this talk and let me know, maybe after, what it showed you when you ask for the most important figures in the world. Now, AI has a lot of potential. I'm not here to be negative about AI. I'm an AI founder. Neither I'm here to be overly positive. My idea is here to be neutral, to lay the neutral ground for our critical thinking. It's just the tool, but it's the way we use it. So in terms of AI helping to solve us gender equality, there's a lot of things that we can do. The AI can really, if it is used correctly, can detect a bias, which is reflected in AI hiring if the tools are designed correctly. Another example that I want to bring in is quite unique. AI application can help us to trace gender equal media representation. So AI applications can analyze media content for the gender biases and provide a real-time feedback to content creators. We have so many content creators online on social media, but also for journalists, if they are really providing a balanced and inclusive stories in today's media. Again, financial inclusion, AI-driven assessment models can provide much more fair lending and opportunities for women entrepreneurs and also individuals in underrepresented communities. So there is so much we can do with AI to close the gap, like accessible AI education, where AI can personalize learning methods, especially for women, to hop on the technology trends much faster. Solutions to these problems. Chris, next slide, please. Next one. That I foresee. I wanted to provide some practical solutions that we can implement today, and they will have effect not tomorrow, but maybe in a couple of months and years. Gender equality impact investing. As a founder, I see it myself. There is a lot of talk about supporting women in venture capital circles, but a lot of those talks It is as it is, to be very honest. It's just a marketing agenda for them to look good. When you really go into a portfolios, you find out of dozens and dozens startups that they have one or maximum two female funded startups. It is kind of just a box to tick, but the reality is somewhere else. It is really very often just a marketing agenda. Okay, so how can we make it right? Can there be some body or agency that can audit venture capital firms or investors who are overpromising and publicly confusing people about gender equality startups, but finally there's really no real action behind that? Support for female AI startups, that might be from my personal view, but again, as we mentioned, the female funded startups are decreasing right now. Well, it should be the opposite. Just imagine the future in the next 20 years, where the majority of AI applications are created again by one gender. How that will look like? I don't think we're going to close that gap in 300 years, but in 1,000 years. So we definitely need to have more women coming with their ideas and with their AI applications to create a balance in the technology world. AI research grants for women. I'm starting my PhD in AI and human rights very soon, and I can tell you the incentives for women are extremely low when it comes to research. It is already very difficult field. They are already very discouraged. So to create more incentives for AI researchers, female AI researchers, to come in and play the role. Equal pay, audits and transparency in technology world, very common that the same role is paid differently when it comes to a woman and a man. But usually what happens, and I was witness of this, when woman asks about the transparency of a salary, she's often considered as a disruptor. She is hindering company's culture and she's isolated in a corner. And this is when she drops out of the technology world. We should create safe space where women can voice their opinions, but also ask about transparency of a salary. And gender equal tech access. By this, I mean a lot of time women have much worse hardware, like iPhones or any other phones, laptops. And the reason, if you even look around yourself, I want you to think about, do you know some men who have better sometimes technological devices than women around you? It is often the case, especially in less developed countries or economically less stable countries. And the reason for that, that women, historically speaking, they care about their families, sister, brothers, and the kids. And the last thing sometimes they focus on is really getting that best technology hardware. So I really urge large corporations who are providing those technological devices like Apple to create maybe some free upgrade systems for women to get the best devices that they can. Because a lot of time those AI applications, I don't know if you try to download some of them, a lot of time they require the latest iOS update or system. So very often they even can't get to the recent AI application if they don't have the best possible technological hardware. And the one that it doesn't need a lot of my words around, empower women in leadership roles. Next slide, please. Now I'll be closing this presentation focusing on AI and human rights. It will be not a long section. Responsible AI really involves a multifaceted and very complex approach that considers not a gender factor, but really race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and much more. It should really center around human-centered and human rights-based framework for governing AI and emphasizing transparency when developing technology as well as accountability. I want to bring another example. I just want you to think, you probably come from different cultures and maybe different languages. Very often AI applications, they are collecting data in English. How often we really collect the data in other languages for all those large AI applications, right? So very often we can't express our values and our perspectives in different language. And the best we can do it is in our own mother tongue language. Why those data to represent us are not collected in that particular language? Responsibility of for AI regulation really goes beyond governments. and we put emphasis on corporations, large corporations, but this is often very hard to trust that they can follow those responsible AI regulations. The United Nations released the principles on business and human rights, where they offered a set of kind of a guiding principle for the businesses, so they can protect the citizens and they can also avoid any business related human rights abuses. Additionally, there were many foundational documents that were adopted in the past when it comes to Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and all those treaties, they already have certain level of protection when it comes to digital technologies. Freedom, rights to internet has become one of the fundamental human rights, and a lot of those treaties are adopted by the wider society and many states, yet they're not respected. Also, when we're talking about those human rights treaties, many of them needs also kind of a modification and update for today's world. You hear a lot of policy advisors saying, oh, we adopted that and that human rights treaty, or we adopted this and this digital act. However, AI applications and technology world is going just so fast that we need to keep updating them on a regular basis, and not to just rely that some treaties that were adopted 20 years back, they can address current needs, because there's a lot of loopholes. And the last thing I want to mention here, when it comes to AI and human rights, because gender equality falls under human rights, AI has a lot of potential, especially when it comes to education enhancement. Next slide, please, Christine. It can provide a better environmental analysis to prevent a pollution, or it can provide a personalized healthcare access and wearable technology, which all falls under our fundamental human rights. Fundamental human rights are our core identity as humans. And I want to emphasize we should be all concerned about this. Very often, you'd be surprised when I talk to in technology circles and I said human rights, I got a question, what are the human rights? People often don't know what are their human rights, which define their partially their identity. And yet there's so much that we can achieve when AI is correctly used. But there are also some negative changes. As we see on the next slide, it can create inequality and unemployment. It is causing a lot of mental health distress for young people on social media. When generative AI as today is used without any guidelines or audit, it can create a lot of misinformation. This is something we're trying to combat in our company. You very often have no reference points from ChatGPT, and those are just a kind of examples what can happen if AI goes out of our hands a little bit. Last but not least, I want to say conflicting narratives about AI really distract, next slide, from the immediate need that we have and the immediate actions that we need to take. Just think about it. We have so many articles and so many discussions about conscious AI. What will happen in 100, 200 years? You know, we have these sci-fi scenarios, and we often think about some hypothetical solutions for it, what we will do in 200 years. And while this is important to talk about, I agree, I think about it as well. We often, and society, especially in technology world, we tend to focus on hypothetical scenarios that are far away, while we have a problem today that is very concrete and we need to create a practical solutions just because it's easier. So my also kind of an insight here today, don't get distracted what will happen in 300 years. It is important. But what you do today will eventually determine what will happen in 300 years. So it is the problems of today that we need to face, and even if they're not comfortable, create a solutions for them. Then, you know, if machine will be conscious. So with that said, I'll be we ran anyway for a little bit longer. Thank you so much for your attention and for your time. And now I'm here open to questions, and I have some questions also for you. Anyone, any insights or questions? I would like to hear your personal experience with AI application. What worries you the most? What do you see as a problem, a challenge, or an opportunity? Please contribute to this discussion so we can have a wider perspective. There's not a wrong answer. So please, whatever is on your mind.
Maybe I can ask a question. Thank you for that great presentation. And something that I was thinking about when you were mentioning all of the potential impacts that it can have with gender inequality